I think I'm going to go outside and explain this whole concept to you. So Ken, if you don't mind, I'm just going to step out and go outside the building and explain this next piece, which I think is the best way of going about disruption. Hold on. Denting the Outside is a new type of disruption strategy that I've been researching not only during this pandemic, but before the pandemic. And it's really about how can we start creating adjacent innovations so that these innovations actually become our new core. In fact, if you see some of the best organizations in the world, this is exactly what they have done. They have dented the outside with some innovations, and they have dented the core. Let me show you what's going on here. And listen, part of the reason why we're here amongst all this art is because I love art. Because art starts with a blank piece of paper, and then you just fill it up with your ideas. I think that's what they say about art. So this is the whole idea of denting the outside. You have the core, and you have the dent. Now, you see, if you try to change something within the core of your organization, it will be too difficult to change things within the organization, and this is why organizations try to dent from the outside. Let me give you some examples of this. A couple weeks ago, you may have seen the news, but Disney is fundamentally disrupting themselves. You see, what Disney has done, they have dented the outside. Traditionally, their core business was parks and media networks, which they've been running really well for the last 100 years. But now they have a new revenue stream that is accelerating, especially during this pandemic, which is Disney Plus and their direct-to-consumer business. And this has now become their new core. They're literally disrupting themselves by denting the outside and making it the new core. You have seen this with Netflix as well. Listen, the core of Netflix's business used to be the DVD business. And then they dented the outside by starting to experiment with things like streaming, and now that has become the new core. This has happened with Adobe as well. I don't know if you remember Adobe. You might know it from the Acrobat Reader on your PC. They literally were shipping to retail outlets, and now they have become a cloud and SaaS provider, and one of the best ones to boot. You've seen it with them. You've seen the same thing with Intuit. They used to sell software to the retailers, and now they've pivoted to SaaS and the cloud. You have also seen it outside of just business. You have somebody like Steph Curry that has revolutionized the game of basketball. Now the reason why you see every single team adopting a three-point game is because of Steph Curry. And now the three-point shot has become the new way that NBA teams are playing. This is the whole idea of denting the outside. And to be honest with you, this is how organizations have been disrupting themselves. So if we think about the experiments that you're working on, it's really about what are some of the experiments that we can be working on outside of our core business, and then maybe one day they might become our new core. I believe that this is actually about risk management, because if you try to change something internally, the immune system of the organization will try to reject it. So Ken, you're probably wondering why I'm bringing this whole idea up of denting the outside, and here's the whole idea. And you talked about this already when it comes to owners, right? The reason why owners are not, sometimes they're not accepting this whole IPD process. It's because of this idea of denting the outside, really, is that, construction has their old way of doing things, right? That it works on this old industrial model of construction. And I believe that IPD is exactly what I was talking about from those experimental types of things, right? This is actually on the outside. And I believe that one day, this actually might be the new core, the new way that we do construction. The reason why it's so difficult to change how construction is done is because of the immune system of the organization. The immune system of construction will literally try to reject it. And I believe that by taking more of an experimental approach, by creating more innovations, we're able to bring this more inside. Let me give you another example, and it's an extreme example of denting the outside. It's really an example during this pandemic. During this pandemic, there's lots of organizations that literally had to shut down their core. Their core did not work. one of the companies was Formula One. In fact, when the pandemic hit, Formula One literally had to shut down all their racing events. But a week later, what they were able to do was they launched their esports virtual Grand Prix to the world. They basically said, we're having this Grand Prix, we're inviting drivers and fans and celebrities to this virtual Grand Prix. And what they were able to do was, not only were they able to attract 30 million people across TV and digital, but they also started to understand that maybe esports could actually one day be our new core. That this actually might generate more revenue and more engagement than our actual races, which is crazy to think. You know, the other thing that was interesting with this Formula One is the way they actually got this idea. Most organizations, when they're trying to try something innovative or experimental, they have this huge business case, a huge plan that might take 280 pages. But for Formula One, all they needed was 280 characters. The way that they were able to get this idea of the esports virtual Grand Prix was just through a tweet. Somebody tweeted them about this idea, and they were able to go off and implement and launch this thing. You know, the other thing that Formula One did during this pandemic is they had all these capabilities in science and engineering, and they said, how can we use all our amazing talent to help with this pandemic? And what they were able to do was bring their teams together, basically in a big room like that IPD would have, and they were able to bring people together. And one of their teams, the Mercedes teams, actually developed a breathing aid that could help with COVID-19. They were able to get the breathing aid approved, and they shipped it out to 10,000 units across Europe. So this also pushed Formula One to think about, hey, listen, how can we start leveraging our core capabilities for things that are outside of our core? And here's how Formula One was able to do all these things. Number one is they allowed full autonomy. They allowed their people to come up with their own ideas and execute. They had this idea of rapid decision making. They leveraged their core skill sets, whether it's in science and engineering and their other skills, to create more innovations. They had this idea that ideas can come from anywhere. That's why they were able to take a tweet and sort of implement that right away. And of course, they work on this idea of small teams and quick sprints. And by the way, when you look at this whole thing, this is the foundation of what IPD is really is. You are literally Formula One and Netflix and Adobe literally trying to become the core within construction. And I'm excited because the more that projects incorporate this idea, I think the more innovative our projects are going to become. This whole idea is very much about experiments. It's about small teams and small sprints and small problems. This idea not only has to be implemented in business or in construction, but this idea of experiments can be taken in every single industry. A number of weeks ago, I was talking to Nick Nurse, who's the head coach of the Toronto Raptors, about his whole idea of experimentation and how he dents the outside without disrupting the core. He had some really great insights of how he was able to do that, and this is what he said. What is your process around experimentation, and how do you try to experiment without, throwing away the existing playbook and the core of what you're doing? So talk to me about your style around experimentation.
I've been fortunate enough to, I was coaching in the British Basketball League where nobody really gave a darn what I was doing or not doing. So I was put in situations where I was trying all kinds of stuff that I just thought seemed reasonable to me. And then, you go on a process of selling that reasonable thought to your team. And, but and putting the whys behind it. Why, coach, why do you think we should do this? And this guy scores all their points or has all their assists, and we're going to take him out. And let's see if they can function without him. At all costs, we're going to take him out, and let's see what happens. And they say, all right, coach, we'll try. It sounds good, and then it starts working, and then it builds momentum, and then they're into it, right? So there's a little bit of testing, selling, communicating, proving the experiment works, and then building on it from there. And that's pretty much it.
See, what I love about what Nick Nurse had to say was, listen, even in basketball, they're trying to experiment, they're trying to disrupt the core. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. I bet the next video is gonna be even better. So hit subscribe and we'll chat in the comments.